Iztok Franko. We all know Iztok, and if you don't, you should go to dmagazine.com, where he will break down things for you, all things Mavericks. You won't see a lot of Stars articles out of Iztok.
I've been waiting.
Not a lot
I've
to
been
offer.
to one hockey game.
Not a lot to offer on SMU football, but the Dallas Mavericks is your love, correct, Iztok?
Yes, but I've been to one Stars game when I was in Dallas last year, and it was a funny experience, I have to say. I couldn't write anything about it, but it was interesting.
Why?
A different, I don't know. I sat in a section, in oversized section. I think it was like everybody was like next to me, so we were like two tiny Europeans, and it was everybody was eating a lot of food and drinks, and we felt a little bit out of place. So it wasn't. We are used to more like this football experience when you stand and yell, and I don't know. But this was like I don't know. I think we got into the wrong crowd.
An oversized section.
That's Texas for you right there.
No. Otherwise, I didn't got that impression. But
everything bigger in Texas, as they say. So, hey, speaking of that, do you live in Slovenia now?
Yes.
Okay, you're from Slovenia.
I mean, I always live in Slovenia.
Okay, I didn't know if you had moved around. Advice on jet lag, as I am going to be traveling to France in a month.
I heard. I watched your prior episode, so I don't know. I never tried starving, so I usually don't have it. So I would still eat in your place, but I don't know. From my experience, from my, let's say, professional work, when I do stuff for airlines, it helps a lot if you fly in business class. That's the only thing that I figured out, that it helps when you get to sleep on the plane and you get a few drinks and good food. So I don't have any problems with food or starving if I fly, let's say, in business class. But when I fly for leisure, it's a problem.
All right. Well, I've recently taken up drinking, so I think that will help.
That'll help, yeah.
Hey, Lindsay, kick that dog. Just kick him. He'll be fine. Or just shake him. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Dog was barking.
Hey, before we get into the trade deadline stuff, there's something I was thinking about the other day, and it was actually before the deadline, whenever it seemed like, boy, this thing is kind of at a dead end. The Grant Williams thing is failing. They don't have many assets. In the event, the catastrophic event that Luka were to move teams, would you follow him specifically?
I don't know. I'm all into Mavericks, so hard to speculate. I don't know.
But if he's a Laker,
I haven't thought much about that, but I think he'll stay. I'm not worried.
I think that's code for his employer covers the Mavs, so he's going to marry himself to the Dallas Mavericks.
I guess that's true. And a fine employer they are.
Oh, that's right. Jake writes for D Magazine as well. Iztok Franko, that's where you can find his fine work at dmagazine.com. And so, yeah, you do write all things Mavs. You follow the Mavs. What are your thoughts on, the trade deadline acquisitions?
I mean, it was a change, right? They needed a change. So I think that's good. And definitely they added more talent. So that's good as well. Now, how they got there and what was the process, that's where I'm not that, let's say, positive. But I think they definitely improved the team. So you can see that. And now I think they have a legit 10-man deep team. Maybe they don't have a top 5 heavy team, what usually works in the playoffs. But I think they have like a legit rotation. So you don't have, and they got bigger, which was very important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just if you think about it from a philosophical standpoint, I don't know how long you've been following the Mavericks closely, but if you wind it back 6 or 7 years when they pushed the Spurs to 7 games, they did that with the 3 guard lineup. I mean, they were so small.
Yeah.
What, it was Devin, Barea, and might even have been Calderon at the time.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of been their bit for a long time, is that we're going to be small, we're going to be quick, we're going to shoot. And now it definitely does feel like a different philosophical thing under Nico, for better or worse.
Yeah, and I think to me it was funny because to me, at least this season and also last season, it felt like that is also J Kidd's thing as well, you know, to play smaller end. Because he, if you remember when he came to Dallas, it was, I think the first thing he said we are going to play some defense. And it was all about defense. And they started with what we speculated was at that time the Lakers template with AD and JaVale, like two big lineups. So at the beginning of Kidd's tenure, they played Kristaps and Powell, and that's when they were good defensively. But after that KP trade, they went all in on these three guard lineups, always have two playmakers on the floor. So last year and this year, I felt more when there was a doubt or where there was a close game. What was interesting for me that J Kidd would always lean into smaller lineups. So I kind of felt that they made a trade specifically, or one of the reasons that they made a trade is to kind of limit that, because defensively these small lineups really don't work.
Yeah, and it's definitely different. And I wonder what you think about just the all-in strategy of, is he still there?
Yeah.
Okay. My StreamYard's busted. I mean, they have really gone all in to the point where, you know, they don't have a whole lot to build with going forward. You know, they could have had 3 first-round picks to move this offseason, and now it just seems like they've really committed to the idea that it's either going to work with Luka or he's going to be gone, and it's going to be a hard rebuild afterward either way.
Yeah, well, I think they still have 2, if I'm not mistaken, that they can trade. And even if this trade did not bring like a big piece or a big star, or let's say what I say, a clear-cut starter, I think with PJ and Gafford, if they play well in this, like, let's say next to Luka, I think there are pieces that they can move. So they have some interesting pieces now. They have good players, like Gafford is a good player, PJ is a good player, Green, so
Even Hardy.
So
yeah,
I'm a little bit more pessimistic on Hardy, but I think, yeah, even he is a young player that could be interesting to some teams. So I think I even tweeted that, I think, before the deadline. I think this route to do like incremental moves, I think it's the right one, because it helped them this year rather than wait. I think they will be much more competitive this year. And I think if everything is about Luka, it's very important to him to be competitive and play competitive playoff basketball. And as I think a lot of people reported, I think he's very happy with the moves that they made this year.
I love your Twitter account because you've been catching me up on PJ Washington and Gafford and what they could do. I was not keeping up with Hornets and Wizards basketball. So for those that haven't, I mean, could you give us just a quick little scouting report on who exactly they got in the trade in Washington and Gafford?
Yeah, like I wrote in this D Magazine breakdown, Gafford is a little bit more easy. It's more like a straightforward player. He's like Derek Lively, but 3 years older. So he's more bulked up. He's a little bit more strength. He's also a little bit smaller. So he's like this big rim run guy, lob threat, great finisher. I think best finisher one of the best finishers in the NBA last 3 years. Big on lobs. And defensively, he is like a rim protector, which I wrote also almost to a fault, you know, because if you watch his film, and also the data confirms this, he wants to block every possible shot, which then typically hurts him on the defensive end. This is one of the, let's say, things that nobody talked about when they brought him in, but defensively, he was one of the worst defensive centers in the NBA in the last 3 years. So always Washington teams, always when he was on the floor, they rebounded on the defensive ends much worse. On offensive, and he's a great rebounder, and we saw this in Dallas last 2 games. He was great. So I think this is one thing that I'll keep an eye on with him. Just can he control, let's say, a little bit of this aggressiveness and try to be a little bit more careful on the defensive end when it comes to rebounding. But I think with Luka and PJ, that's also a little bit mitigated. And if he will play against, not always against the starting caliber centers that bully him a little bit because he's not that big, I think that won't be so much of a problem. But he's like a great guy, energy guy. And I think for a backup five, he's probably one of the best backups, or if he's a starter, he's, let's say, a little bit below average NBA starting center, but still much better than what Dallas had, let's say, last year or prior years.
So before you get to PJ,
yeah.
Luka said he is excited he finally got his backup center. So is his ceiling like he'll never be a starter, you think? He'll always come off the bench?
No, I think for Dallas, I think it will be interesting what will happen with Lively and Gafford. I don't think it either matters that much. I think if they manage to split, let's say, 35 to 40 minutes between them, and they play like with high energy because they are energy guys, and we know that for bigs it's not easy to play with this high energy for 40 minutes or 45. So I think that's like a perfect combination. So these guys, they don't need to be that much careful about foul trouble. They can be all in. And then, as we saw last game, I think at the end, they will anyway, for certain matchups and in close games, they will go with Max or PJ at the five because defensively, they both have limitations in terms of how much they can switch, how aggressive they can be. Gafford is mostly drop back center, so doesn't have a great on-ball defenders that work well with this drop defense. So I think we'll see in close games a lot of still Maxi Kleber and PJ Washington, like your 4-5 big man combination.
Right now, what would you say the Mavs' biggest problem is?
I mean, it's a little bit difficult now to evaluate after this trade because we have just 2 games of sample size. Before, it was definitely defense and health, of course, and size. But if I see this team now, I would still say like a high-end quality starter, like a wing defender. That would be a clear-cut third or fourth best player. So it's still hard to answer who is the third best player on this team now, you know? I don't think one day you could say it's PJ Washington, you can say it's Lively, you could say it's Gafford, you could say it's Tim Hardaway Jr., you could say it's, I don't know, Dante Exum. That I think is what they might miss, you know? Somebody to defend opposing best player, because we saw what they did last night with starting lineup. So they started Washington instead of Derrick Jones Jr. And I think Derrick Jones Jr. has been their best, let's say, primary defender on ball or on opposing wings. And this is, so again, we are shuffling a little bit offense and defense. But they have a lot of, I think, flexibility. So if something doesn't work, they can now change it and go into completely different looks, which is great.
You know, you mentioned health too, just like that's what I think. That's a maddening thing to say is your biggest, problem. But, Luka and Kyrie have played together like 50% of the games Kyrie's been here. Not much more than that, if more. And then the Luka, Lively, Kyrie trio has, when they're on the court, seems great. But that just doesn't seem very often. So, and then that leads me to say that's a really convenient excuse that Jason Kidd could point at or wave his arm at, and he's right. But also it's maddening that Jason Kidd kind of cites that so often.
Yeah, but I think at least for Lively, they now have Gafford, so you can mitigate that. Because before it was a really big drop-off, and now you have basically, one could say, even a little bit better clone of that because Lively is still a rookie, yeah? So I think that's one thing that they really have a backup plan now. As for Kyrie, as we said, he's the clear-cut second best player and he's like a star, and you cannot really have a backup of them, and his health for sure will determine what they can do in the playoffs. I think they have more talent around now. So in the regular season, the drop-off like it was this year they won't struggle so much, even if he misses again a bunch of 5 or so many games. But in the playoffs, you cannot survive without him being healthy, and this is like a bit risky.
Do we have Dinwiddie news? Has he chosen?
Yeah, he's a Laker.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, he went with father instead of he
Yeah.
called Mavericks like mom and Lakers the dad, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't pull the audio because it was kind of low quality, but he said, you go to Dallas, you get in a fight with a bully. Dallas is like the mom that tells you it's going to be okay. He's like, the Lakers are the dad that tell you to get out there and fight, which I don't really know.
What was interesting?
Yeah, it was a weird comment.
What was interesting, I don't know, there was other news today that Kuzma, that basically the Kyle Kuzma trade, that Dallas has everything sorted out, but he didn't choose the Mavericks because he wanted to stay. And he threw like something similar. He said, there are like only 2 true contenders, and I already won the championship. So I think I got that, like Dallas is not a true contender, so I want to stay and build in Washington. So the funny thing to me was like we got like Mavericks this in 2 days by 2 guys that hate each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you remember last year they had like find on Twitter Kyle Kuzma thread is like a 5. It's like my thread, like with five things saying why Dinwiddie sucks and why he's like insecure person. So
can we take that a little bit as an indictment of Luka? Like not wanting. We always thought people love to play next to Luka because he makes them better.
Well, not Grant Williams.
Very few guys have not had that.
Who's now joined the media parade of throwing shots at Dallas.
But there was somebody else the other day.
What did he do?
He just said after the game, he was player of the game or whatnot, and he was just like, it feels good to play for a team that cares more about the name on the front than the back. And people are thinking that's a shot at Luka.
But there was somebody else the other day that I saw interviewed that said, I really wanted to be in Dallas, and it just didn't work out. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just Kyle Kuzma's a guy who wants no pressure.
Yeah,
that's what I've always thought of him.
I think he's 28 years old. Okay, he won a championship with Lakers, but if you want to play on a, competitive team in Dallas, or you want to play next to Jordan Poole, I mean, life priorities. I think it's a interesting choice that tells a lot.
9-39 right now.
It's not 9-44.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah.
Any windsurfing plans soon?
I mean, in the summer. Yeah. I'm going to Norway on Wednesday. I have sister there, so it's snow, then it's sun and windsurfing. So typically that comes in the summer, in June, and then August and September.
This is the most interesting man in the world, Dan.
Yeah, he's got a lot going on.
He does. He really does.
And somehow D Magazine tracked you down. So why don't you write for us?
Well, we don't really publish writing,
but you have something where you write then.
What are your thoughts on J Kidd overall? Evaluation of him as a head coach. Sometimes we wonder what he does.
That's an interesting way to put for an NBA coach. I mean, J Kidd, what everybody is telling, was brought to basically manage Luka and Kyrie now. Yeah, so it's like this relationship management, or let's say players coach, which is basically the thing. And as far as I see it, the relationships he has with Luka and with Kyrie and probably with some other guys on the team work. So I think that's the main thing. How much of that is long term, I don't know. I mean, we saw, as I said, that during this year, I think they had some struggles, and I saw that probably the people started talking about, I don't know, him and his work publicly a lot for the first time probably during his these 3 years in Dallas. So I think it will be interesting what will happen with this playoff run, because I think the obvious, like if I go back to what Jake said, they don't have that much wiggle room, although they have some. But I think the biggest move you can pull off is change the coach, right? So that's one, let's say, card that they can play in the summer and say, okay, we're starting something new. But I think now with the moves they have, I think a lot of the things like you mentioned, then like we are not healthy or we don't have the right players or we are not built for defense or things like that. I think a lot of these excuses now will not be there anymore. So I think this end of this season and playoff run will tell a lot about how does he stay in Dallas past this offseason.
And I'm wondering one more thing that just your opinion on it, as you've watched Luka since he was a kid, and just the narrative about his inability to control his emotions and how much that hurts him or how much that fuels him. Where do you fall on that? Like, does he need to really change his game, I guess, in that regard?
I mean, it's a complex thing. Yeah, we are talking about this for a long time, and we see, I mean, the moments when it hurts him, it's like they're so obvious. Yeah. So, but I think in a way, it's also part of what makes him good. He's like this very passionate, playful person. So, I think the joy that he has playing basketball, he's like, most of them basketball players that I know personally don't have that. So they don't like to play every practice, every game, every minute. And sometimes some of this stuff hurts him. And it's also the same with competitiveness. So we'll see that I think last year or this year, he showed he can change some of the things that some of the narratives that were there for him. For example, focus on defense or playing faster and things like that. So I don't know, probably there is a way that he improves also on that. And although I don't think it will be like complete 180 turn ever. So I don't think that's not who he is, in my opinion, based on what we saw.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. What time is it there?
It's going to be 7 p.m.
Okay.
It's
plenty
not
of
that
time to
late,
get
yeah.
to bed. You're fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll encourage everybody to go to dmagazine.com and read Iztok Franko and then read Jake.
Yes, in that order, please. Bye, Iztok.
Bye, guys. Thanks.